Welcome to another edition of the MYB Cast, a podcast devoted to educating our followers to alternatives for self-care and wellness through the somatic world of mind and body connection. Today we're featuring yet another episode of our series in Portraits of Pioneers. Portraits of Pioneers is an in-depth look at those that have been actively involved in the exploration, the development, and the practice of somatic touch therapy. I'm Richard Mack, and I'm here with my co-host Anna Marie Bowers. And now we're featuring Kate Rose in episode 3 of our podcast. Anna Marie, take it away.
Thanks, Richard. And welcome back, everyone, and welcome back, Kate. In this session, we'd like to hear a little bit about your work with horses. I understand that you are an equine empath, and so we'd like to know a little bit about your work with horses and a little bit about what else you're doing with this Emanations of Light project that you've got going right now.
Thank you. Working with horses is the most wonderful thing in the world. It came about when I was making a transition in my life and I was living in a friend of mine's horse farm. And I went out to the barn one morning. And at that time, her beautiful horse, Bo, who has passed now, who was 16, 17 hands, very tall, like I could reach my arms up and not be able to reach his ears. He was having trouble. She said he's having trouble with his leg. And I stood back, I was standing back from the stall, and I just looked at him just the way I'd look at anybody, and I said, it's not his foot, it's his shoulder. And I realized I could see the same thing I'd see with people. So then I went in and she is also does equine massage and Reiki and stuff. But of course, it's just like if it's a relative or someone you're close to, it's very hard to get the perspective. So I started by putting my hands on him and was able, it just worked. Like I said, with a 1,600 pound animal, you're not going to say to them, could you please just shift your weight? You can't do that. But what I did was I simply just leaned in with my own weight and very soft hands, and I waited. And I used the sense of feeling into the tissue and feeling what healthy tissue would feel like, what balance would feel like. I just hung out with that. And very shortly afterwards, he started shifting his weight, both side to side and then front to back. All I had to do was give him a tiny bit of pressure and he would move. And so that was the first experience. And then we did a lot of work. She had 6 or 7 horses there at the time, so I was working with all of them. And each one was different and totally incredible. And then when I moved to Virginia, I connected with a woman who had a big farm who was a retirement home for thoroughbred racehorses mostly. And these are animals that have been terribly, terribly abused. And, they're used in incredibly intense ways and then basically thrown away when they're not winning their races anymore. But they're trained athletes. And so the first horse she had me work with was a horse. There's different kinds of races. And this particular horse, it was like a sprint where they'd come out of the gate really fast and run for a very short distance, right? So this dynamic in the physiology was this clenching of the back hips and the legs and this push off. And this horse had been trained to do this from the time it was a tiny horse. And then just stopped. And so she got to the point where she couldn't ride him because she didn't know what ride her because she didn't know what she was going to do. And I went in and I put my hands on her sacrum, so to speak. And I was like, oh my God, this is completely twisted and just compressed and held. It was waiting to take off. It was the pattern in her consciousness, God love her, and in all of her tissues was what she had been trained for. And so I just hung out there with her for a while and was able to, again, she started shifting weight very quickly. And at one point it just dropped the way a sacrum will drop. And I stepped back and I said, there she goes. And then she did a perfect downward dog. She just stretched out her front legs and her neck, and she just did this amazing stretch. And then she came over, and this is what the horses do, which of course you cannot do with human clients. She came over, she rubbed her head all over my body, she kissed me. They thank you because they have their own stuff. Everybody's got their traumas and their issues, but they don't hold on to things, and uh, they don't have a difference between giving and receiving. It's this circular thing that they're allowed to do. So for me, it was just an amazing experience with every single horse. There was one horse where she had a barn that was an open barn, so the horses could come in out of the weather. And there was about 15 or 20 horses in this barn. And she had just gotten this new horse, and he wouldn't let anybody come near him. And he wasn't mean, he was just terrified. And she said, I'll show him to you. So I went over and stood about 10 feet from him. And I just stood there, and we looked at each other. And I basically was just saying to him, I love you so much. And I'm not going to do anything. I'm just going to stand here and be with you. And I did for a few minutes. And I turned around, went to the other side of the barn, and I'm hanging around with all these horses. For some reason, I had no fear of them. It was really interesting. I never, ever felt anything but joy with them. And suddenly this woman goes, oh my God. And we look over, and this horse is walking from the other end of the barn straight over to me and just laid his head on my shoulder. And from that moment, he was madly in love with me, and I with him. So when I would come and visit, if any of the other horses tried to get near me, he was like, she's mine. And I have some wonderful photographs of him just doing his head cuddle. But it was a really extraordinary manifestation of the work, because it was, like I said, there was a horse that, again, a retired racehorse, and couldn't walk correctly anymore. It wasn't lame, and he didn't have any kind of injuries, but he just didn't know how to do it. And they kept trying to just keep walking him, walking him. And I just stood there with him one day, and I looked at him, and I just said, we're going to walk backwards now. So we just walked backwards, and then he was fine. So it's, again, the ability to see is the best way I can describe it. And for me, this has to do with the way I look at clients, whether it's a horse or a human, is standing back far enough so I can see the shapes, so I can get a sense. Milton always said that. He said, if you look at someone, something's always going to jump out at you. You know, like a client will come in and say, I have a really big problem with my left shoulder. And I'd say, but you know, I'm really attracted to your right knee. And then they tell you all about their right knee. So the trust, the intuition. But I have to say that working with the horses was my favorite thing ever in the entire universe. It just is a blissful, joyful, amazing. They're so heartful. And they know when you are, you know, they're very, very, very sensitive. I went out into the field one day at that farm, and I just stood in the field. There were about 14, 15 horses there. One by one, they each came over and greeted me. I have a picture of one of them kissing me. And the woman who I was working with, her husband was very, what's that word? I forget, when, you know, someone is, that's crazy stuff. He couldn't believe it either, because I'd never seen anything like it. And it was just, like you said, it's like they know what love is. And so do I.
Yeah.
That's
I have a
awesome.
very dear friend of mine that lives up in upstate New York, Saratoga area. She's very into horses. I'm going to make sure she gets a copy of this episode. I remember when you were in Virginia and you were doing that work,
Yeah.
and how you were just you glowed around that work, and you were so excited telling stories about what you were doing with that. And that's a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful piece. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for asking for it. As far as the emanations of light, like everyone else that I know in this moment in our country, is terrified. And there is a sense of encroaching darkness. And I was constantly asking, you know, what could I do to support my community, my loved ones, whatever. And that's what came in. It was one of those things that showed up at 2:00 in the morning. which is inevitably the time where you can be doing really well all day, whatever issue you're dealing with, and at 2 o'clock in the morning it shows up and that's it, you're up for the rest of the night. So it just came to me as a thing to do. And then, there's all these prayers and poems that I just love, that I use in my own practice, life practice, spiritual practice, whatever. And I just started sharing them with people, and now it's grown. It's getting bigger and bigger, which is wonderful. And I didn't really realize at the time I started it that I would need to come up with 365 different poems and prayers. So it's put me in a place where I'm constantly discovering amazing poetry. And because of course I'm trying to make it very, very universal, so that it's not people, having to be a particular religion or anything like that, but just the idea of light, of peace, joy, gratitude, all of those things that support us. And I keep hearing from people. I know Richard wrote me and just saying, I'm starting my day with this and it's really, really helping. So that's been really wonderful for me in many ways, but also because one feels so helpless. And this is something that, again, because I do feel the most important thing in this time is community. As many elements of community as we can come together with and find our strength as human beings with ethics and morals and truth and all of those things that kind of going by the wayside. So that's where Emanations came from. And it's basically people just, are emailing me and saying, here I have 3 more people that want to join. And I actually made an alphabetical list, which is really impressive. At some point I'll figure out, because I'm not a tech person. So figuring out simple things like how to make a list and have it be able to press a button and have it be there every time. But yeah, I've found things that, that I just love. And again, like I said, I'll sometimes wake up 2 in the morning. Some of that is what's going on in the world, and some of that has been the process of grieving, and realizing I'm not going to lay here in fear. I don't need to do that. So get up, make a cup of tea, grab 10 books, and start finding prayers. So it's been very, very healing for me.
How would somebody get in touch with you if they're interested, or if they're interested in seeing you for a session?
Email or my phone is the easiest way to do that. Did you want me to say them, or is it something?
Yes.
Yeah, my email is katerose7@gmail.com, all small letters, Kate Rose and the number 7 @gmail. My cell is 540-206-5112, and you can, text me. It's probably better initially to email me, because if I start getting texts from people I don't know, I don't usually accept them. So once I have your, somebody's name, then I'm happy to do that. But yeah, I was asking people to send an email and say, please put me on the list. And that's what's been happening.
It's been incredibly wonderful to start my day with these also.
So glad.
It does make a difference to get a positive, inspirational kind of message first thing in the morning. It resets your day. It resets your feelings of the day. It just really does make a difference.
I'm so glad. I'm so glad. It's just wonderful. It's wonderful to be able to share it. And it's an amazing feeling watching it grow, because I think, oh my goodness, I'm talking to 40-some people every morning, and that's been very, very beautiful. Thank you.
And people need to realize that you do have a choice. I mean, if you live from the inside out, you're projecting to the world what it is that you want to give to the world. What would you like to be living in? You don't have to be out there just receiving the news and just rolling up into a ball and saying, "Oh my God, what are they going to do next?" No, 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 no. Let that be for the beginners.
Well, I think we have to acknowledge this in this particular situation. We're not obviously going to get into it, but the effects of shock and trauma, and what
Sure.
this very well, what the system does with shock and trauma. I was speaking with my sister yesterday, and she said, I'm completely frozen. I said, well, let's unfreeze you. realizing, which again, that goes all the way back to the beginning of my work that used to be called The Choice to Feel, that was the core of it. There is a choice, and until you can remember that you have a choice, which is exactly the same as a session, you're simply eliciting a memory that isn't conscious, it isn't available at that moment. Once that memory becomes available, then you can say, well, do I want it or do I not want it? Or what would it feel like to be in that memory? You don't even have to take it, just take a bite and see if you like it. And usually people like it. So,
Yes.
Speak a little bit more about that choice to feel.
That was what I called my work in the very, very beginning, because I am what's referred to nowadays, it's actually in the mainstream, as being an empath, a full empath, which just means that probably I have 9 million extra mirror neurons or something, who knows. But I've always been able to feel everything everybody's feeling all the time. And when I was young, I thought, well, everybody feel, I couldn't imagine when somebody say, what do you mean you can't feel that? And of course, again, that was what drew me to Milton, that I knew he knew what feeling was. And so that work was initially based in a whole bunch of different practices and workshops and private consultations to be able to find that place. There was a program I did for a long time called The Swift Path to the Heart, because I discovered that most of us focus in the mind, figuring out with the mind. But if you access the heart, it's not an either or, it's a connecting of. So that there's this, if you begin to bring your attention to the heart in a very particular way, you can link it with the mind, but your heart becomes the reference point first. So you're moving into the feeling realm. And of course, in the world, the feeling realm has not been given a lot of credit. Intuition is like, it's just your intuition. Like, right. So yeah, that's still around. And then the functional empathy somatics, where out of that PTSD training in Cairo, working with trauma, which I'd worked with lots of trauma, but that was a very particular situation of war, and what it does to the system. And these brave, incredible women, they were just amazing. Being able to translate that into allowing the system, to respond, and discovering, wanting to, like you're talking about language, wanting to name the different types of empathy. Because in, I think, Daniel Goleman's emotional intelligence, scientifically they just they break it down into 3, cognitive, compassionate, emotional. And people say, oh, I'm that kind of it, But the truth is, all of them exist in us. One usually takes the forefront. But if you can bring them all together, this is what I was going to do in Paris when COVID hit. We were invited to Paris to do this wonderful thing at the Sorbonne. And that was what I was going to present, this idea of accessing the empathy that lives in us naturally, of course, compassion on that level, and using all of them, cognitive, emotional, compassionate, knowing which one to use when, but being able to embody all of them.
Wonderful. Kate, are you working with people remotely?
During COVID, I did a lot of Zoom classes, and actually I just created it, not just create, I have several NCBTMB approved provider courses, and someone just asked me, can I do this one? So I'll give you the dates and stuff. I'm setting up 2 classes. One is a Zoom class for it's called hello brain, please work. My brain it's stopping, my mind is in a different place.
Well, more importantly than that, where could
The heart of the matter, the heart of our matter.
Heart of the matter. Okay.
The heart of our matter, so that it's a lot of different things, but really getting that, how to get to the core. What is the core? It's not just the stomach. Not
Yeah.
just the spine, right? The core of each cell, if you will.
You're a beautiful resource, and people that are learning this work and having a desire to be educated from somebody that has had so much experience with it as you have, I think it would be wonderful for them to reach out to you, and however way they can work with you would be beneficial to them.
Thank you. Well, like
Sharing.
I said, I'm going to do this Zoom course in March, and then I'm going to set up I'm setting up a in-person course here in Ann Arbor in June because it's so nice in June. And so I can email you all the information for it if you want it to
That
put
would
it
be
on.
great.
Good.
Yeah, it'll be fun to start teaching again. I've been kind of on a unexpected sabbatical for a couple of years as I focused on healing my own system and dealing with the things that life threw my way.
Are you still doing your flower essence, the flower essence that you were doing upstate New York that I thought was so wonderful?
Well, I've been using flower essences since I was 18 years old. In fact, I was looking, there's a wonderful book that's called The Bach Flowers Form and Function, which is a very scientifically oriented with Julian Barnard. And I was looking at it because, the first remedies I experienced was when I was 18 years old, was the Bach remedies or Batch remedies, depending upon how you pronounce it. And when I met Milton, the dynamic was very much the same because he would say, you didn't separate the person from the disease, believing that what happened to the physical body was directly related to a patient's mentality, spiritual, emotional circumstances. Nothing more than a temporary relief unless the real cause is removed. And so the focus was finding the true cause of what's going on and treating that. Whereas I found over the years, people would tend to treat the superficial causes. And it's the same with body work or somatic work, where I'm going to relax this muscle. No, you have to relax the place in the mind that's holding to that muscle. So yeah, flower essences are a huge part of my life. I created the Rose Angeles remedies, which was a really incredible experience. And that goes into my own relationship with the earth, with the mycelial network, which I've been using for the network itself, using that for healing my system and other people's systems. I don't know. Are you familiar with the mycelial network? In terms
Oh,
of
yes, the underground for the
yeah,
trees and yes,
it's the nervous system of the earth, really, every
yes,
single plant. And when you look at a picture of it, you go, whoa, that looks just like a human nervous system. It is.
it is.
And we're totally connected to it. So this connection is what I'm very fascinated with. And I've started using it in everyone I touch so that it's just in my consciousness that I'm not just working with their nervous system. I'm working with their nervous system and the nervous system of the earth, because unless we're going to reconnect with
Hmm.
nature in this very, very conscious way, as you can see, the planet is having quite a difficult time. So the essences, because they're very, very subtle, they're a very type of subtle, what you would call vibrational medicine. My body doesn't accept chemical medicine. It never did from the time I was a child because it wasn't what was actually needing to be treated. So I started, I was introduced to the essences when I was 18. Someone just dropped rescue remedy in my mouth and I thought, oh my God, I found my medicine. And from that point on, I have been using them. And then, as I say, developed my own, which was a wonderful, anyone can make flower essences. You just take some flowers, put them in water, some sun. But I wanted the relationship with each flower. So I wanted to know that I could hear what they were telling me. I thought, if I can, I can. If I can't, I can't. So I made the first essences, and then I just would take some, sit down with a notebook, get real quiet, and just start, like you say, writing. Just start writing what was coming in, and I was astonished, really astonished at what showed up. So yeah, they're one of my favorite things in next to the horses, flower essences. Because yeah, and so I say, if people are interested in them, because people often say, "Oh, I love flower essences. I don't understand what they do, or I can't really feel them." This is where I think Julian Barnard's work is so important because he's brought the science, he's created the science around it, which is really, really incredible. Like looking at a plant and seeing the form and the function and understanding why the remedy does what it does. It's very interesting work.
Ah, well, thank you for sharing that. Is there anything else that you'd like to share before we wrap up this episode?
I think the only thing I can think of is following your own path as it guides you and trusting your own intuition. We can learn incredible things from millions of people and millions of books and millions of trainings and all those things. But to me, the true gift of a person expressing their own gifts of healing and interconnectedness with everyone else is when one can begin to listen inside to what, quote unquote, your gut is telling you, your intuition. Listening. I think that for me right now, my life is about listening, um, coming to a place where I honestly had no idea what was going on anything, and had no feeling to move in any direction. So just sitting still and listening, and being quite astonished, for instance, when something like this shows up. And I'm still doing that, just listening. And that's really what I learned, I would say, from Milton. Well, he was listening all the time, listening to the tissue, listening to the person, because that's, to me, was the most magnificent discovery, was that the system is talking quite loudly all the time. And if you can get out of the way enough, it'll tell you exactly what, not only what it needs, but how to give it what it needs.
Beautifully said. Thank you, Kate. Thank you so much for taking the time with these 3 episodes of sharing where you are and where you've been and where you're going. It's always a delight. Always, always, always a delight working with you.
Thank you so much. It's really, really been lovely. Thank you both. It's so nice to spend the time with you.
It's been lovely. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Okay. So I'm going to invite our listeners to stay tuned for our next episode. It'll be coming up soon. We have a number of people slated to be on our interviewing list, and we're going to ask Kate to join us back again, solo and maybe with some tag team efforts. I'm thinking Gail and you would make a wonderful episode. What do you think, Anna Marie?
I think that would be a great idea.
All right, let's make it happen.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Kate. Be well. Bye-bye.